And the very last session for Thailand Focus 2018 now is a political roadmap, the election ahead by Mr. Abhisit Vejjajiva, leader of Democrat Party, Mr. Chaturon Chaisang, representative of Phue Thai Party, and Mr. Anutin Charnvirakul, leader of Bhumjaithai Party. And this session will be moderated by Ms. Haslinda, Amin, Chief International Correspondent for Southeast Asia, Bloomberg TV. Now please join me in welcoming all the speakers and moderator on the stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Now, it's been 4 years since the junta government took over power in Thailand, and Thailand's political future looks pretty uncertain. Elections have been postponed again and again and again, and now the polls are scheduled for February 2019, and even then, there are questions whether that will happen. And in the meantime, the junta government is also finalizing a legal framework that may have it in control even after the election. So, where does Thailand go from here? How does its political roadmap look like? And what needs to be done to ensure stability and democracy in the years to come? So I'm really looking forward to getting the insights and perspective from our speakers today. Good, Abhisit, maybe we can start with you. I mean, the February 2019 polls, will it likely happen?
I think the person who should answer this question is missing. Maybe you should invite him and, or his representatives to explain to us.
What's the sense you're getting, and why do you think the delay, that there's been so much delay? What's your take on that?
Well, let me put it this way. I meet a lot of people up and down the country. Very few people actually believe that it's going to take place on the 24th of February. And that's not surprising. You mentioned yourself that the date has been put forward, delayed so many times. And at the moment, we're at the stage where there should be a fair degree of certainty because of the timetable set in the Constitution, the highest law of the land. But the 24th of February is basically counting what they would say is the earliest date that would be possible, given that there needs to be gaps between when the organic laws, the remaining two organic laws are put into effect, and then 5 months after that, elections had to be held. So they're still saying between February and May. And our feeling is we don't detect a sense of urgency on the part of the government or the junta to move ahead. So we will be ready for February, but our belief is that it's more likely to be at a date later than that.
How are you gearing up, given that there is a ban on political activity?
Well, we do things informally.
What exactly?
We don't break the law, but we do what's necessary that we have to do. No, the key thing for us, I can't speak for other parties, we're not too worried about all the mechanics of complying with the election law or the political parties law. I think we can all get that done. For us, what's more important is we need to prepare a good set of policies for the country, because we have so many challenges ahead of us, actually facing us right now, not just in the future. The disruptions caused by technology, given the outdated laws and legal system, if you like. We have the challenges that we need to re-engage with the rest of the world once we return to elections. We'll actually be chair of ASEAN next year. We should be thinking about what kind of agenda would serve both Thailand and ASEAN best. We should be thinking about how we deal with the situation where Thailand rapidly moves towards being an aged society without a welfare system that covers a sizable portion of the population at the moment. These are all the things that we are thinking about, and we are preparing ourselves because we think that's what people need. In fact, the more immediate needs is that people are suffering economically, and they really are having expectations that at least the elections would spark off some changes so that their livelihoods would improve.
Kun Chaturon, Kun Abhisit was saying that there's no sense of urgency to hold these elections. Should there be, on the part of the government, should there be a sense of urgency? If you take a look, the country's doing pretty well. Growth is 4.4% this year, expected to be 4.2%. Doing pretty well in relations to other emerging markets. The baht is pretty strong, despite the fact that there's been an emerging market rout. There is some sort of stability. Is there a sense of urgency that this election should be held?
There's a sense of urgency. There's been sense of urgency for about 4 years already. The longer the military is in power, the more the worse for the country will be. And
in what sense? What gets worse?
This country has pay very high cost for the stability that is taken care of by the military. And under a system that is dictatorial, is not accepted by international community. So cooperation with international community has been diminished. Trade investment, not as much as it should be. And more important than that, people cannot participate in the decision-making of the government or government agencies. So we are under a system that is trying to determine the framework for the country for the next 20 years by some group of people who never have to listen to anybody, never listen to people. So actually, we not only lose what we have lost, but we are going to lose even more, lose the opportunity to be advanced, to be able to deal with the future problems of the country, dynamic world, because of the rigid strategy and reform plans that are formulated by some group of people, which has never been tested by the Thai public. So we are losing in this sense. So the longer they are in power, the more Thai people will lose. So there's a sense of urgency this way.
Has Prime Minister Prayut put into place policies which have worked?
Yes, some. But you cannot count even one that can be called a reform. This military came into power by promising that they're going to reform the country. First, they were talking about reforming political system. And then they go beyond that by saying that they're going to reform the country. So far, nobody can tell, including the NCPO and the government themselves. Nobody can tell where the reform is. There are some policies that are good, but you cannot really tell in a specific one that is very good. The economy is growing at a faster rate gradually from 2 point something to 3 point something and 4 something. But the problem is the distribution. Because Thailand's economy based on export sector. Now services are more important, play a greater role. But export sector, when the export sector grows faster, it doesn't mean that it's gonna benefit the majority of people. So when you go to talk with people on the street, people everywhere, they will say, well, the economy is so bad because they cannot make money. They don't have enough income. They cannot survive the cost of living. When the government is talking on TV that the economy is growing faster than last year with pride. So we have to look at the distribution of income in this country. We have to find some way to make sure that the majority of people, or people in general, can benefit from the growth of this country. And this is neglected by, this kind of concept is neglected by this government because they repeatedly say that the economy is doing well, we are doing the right thing, we are in the right track, but they are speaking not the same language as the people in general, with the laymen and then people in most part of the country.
I'll pick up on the issue of distribution of wealth slightly later. Kun Anutin, in the meantime, from your perspective, what's the biggest risk in the delay of an election?
Well, first, I don't believe that the election will not be held beyond the first half of next year. I have prepared myself for the worst, that I would extend until June of next year. I mean, at least everyone must have gut feeling first. And I believe that anything beyond June of next year, the consequence of not having election held will be more than anyone can bear. It won't be the government's problems, it won't be NCPO's problem, it will become all Thais' problems. And I might perceive things differently from my two predecessors. I believe election has to be held within next year, within the first half of next year. This is my belief. So I haven't prepared anything for after that, because it won't only be a party's concern. It will be national concern if election hasn't taken place by then.
We talked earlier about.
Yeah, I think we agree. It's just I said I didn't believe it would be in February. Because that was a question.
My apologies.
But the latest, according to the time frame, is May, with still some potential risks. And I would agree with Kun Anutin that failing to hold elections in the first half of next year bears a real risk of stability, national stability, because there is growing frustration among the people, partly because of the economic situation. And I wouldn't put it in terms of
Are you suggesting there could be protests?
I think we're all suggesting. We're all suggesting that we can detect a sense of frustration, which could turn into anger. And that's something that is not healthy. And you mentioned about the stability, the apparent stability that we see now. It is being achieved by means which are not sustainable. And it is stability which is something that Thai people are prepared to afford only for a certain period of time. And the economic situation, and I was going to add, you have to look at the whole story. You can't just look at the GDP number anymore. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the National Statistics Office, they do household income surveys every 2 years. And the last couple of surveys, no, 3 surveys, last year, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, there is a clear trend that in a number of provinces, particularly those that rely on farm income or agricultural income, you're not just seeing slower growth than GDP. In some provinces, household income has declined by more than 30%. That's a huge number. And it shouldn't surprise people. If you look at, say, in the south, rubber price is now a third of what it was when we were in government. That's only 7, 8 years ago. Prices of palm oil also very low. The value of the fishery industry after the government's attempt to appease the EU and the United States is now half of what it was 4 years ago. So it shouldn't surprise you that for most provinces in the south, this is just an example, they are really suffering. It's not just a question of not getting that extra 1 or 2 or 3 or 4%. Their incomes are actually declining. Up in the north and northeast, you have this huge shock that they all had from scrapping the rice pledging scheme, which from our point of view is something that needs to be done. But you also have to put in place a policy that would allow farmers to be able to manage their incomes. That has been absent. So you shouldn't underestimate the underlying frustration and the expectations people now have about the need to have elections so that their livelihoods have a real chance of improving. And in terms of stability, the uncertainty caused by continuous postponement, the way that they are tampering with the rules, probably to the advantage of parties that will support them, this does not create the kind of political stability in the long run. On the contrary, Thai politics will be seen to be stable. The first important step is that you have to make sure that elections are fair and credible. And if for some reason elections are unfair because those in power now, who started off as being referees and now wanting to be players, keep changing the rules, and there's no acceptance or credibility from the people who exercise the vote, that's a recipe for political instability in the future. So for me, the job of the NCPO now is to stick to their words, make sure that free and fair elections take place, and that make sure that the will of the people expressed through the ballot box is respected. That's the only way to take the country forward and to gain political credibility that we need to have.
Kun Chaturon, do you expect a free and fair election?
No. I wish it would be. But it appears that election will not be free and fair.
Because?
Because a lot of things. Well, let me go back to the first question a little bit, because I didn't say anything about the postponement of the election. When Kun Anutin said he disagreed, he have a different view from me, but I didn't say anything to be different from him yet. I've been asked several times in the past 4 years. Roughly, I have to answer. I was asked a question, do I believe that the election will take place as scheduled? So roughly four years in a row. And I always said that I don't believe that it will be held as scheduled. And I was right every time. This time, it is less feasible for the NCPO to postpone the election because there is something to do with the constitution, like Kun Abhisit said. After the organic laws concerning the election are enforced, which means after 90 days after it is promulgated. Then you have another 150 days. You must hold the election within those 150 days. If the NCPO wants to postpone the election, they have to either amend the constitution or issue an order by using Article 44. And then we, all of us here, will go to the Constitutional Court and ask the Constitutional Court to see if that is constitutional. The Constitutional Court might say, well, it is constitutional because they have the absolute power of Article 44 of the Constitution. But that is not easy for them. It is very difficult to explain to the public. So, but the reason that the NCPO has postponed or delayed the election so many times, they use the technicality of the lawmaking to be the excuse to postpone. They didn't say the reason. The reason is very, very simple. The reasons are very simple. There are two reasons. One is they want to hold on to power, cling on to power as long as possible. The second reason is they want to prepare as best they can so that they can come back as the government, or their leader can come back as prime minister after the election. So with that kind of strategy, they have tried to weaken political parties by designing the organic laws. They have frozen all of the activities of political parties for no good reason at all. So we cannot even hold meetings, we cannot even do the press conference. Some parties hold press conference, might be arrested, might be prosecuted. Very important is that the system design is just meant to weaken the existing political parties. And then they don't allow us to formulate policy, which needs and require participation of people, interaction with people. So it means that they are trying to weaken not only political parties, but political party system. And they are making the election less meaningful in this sense, because there is no interaction between people and electorates and political party. Now, the NCPO still has the power of Article 44. Several orders that prohibit political parties to do activities. That means they can interfere with the election as they like. The NCPO has absolute power until the new government is formed and start performing its duty. Meaning you are under a system that is under an absolute power of a group of people or a person. And this is the first election, probably it's first election, not only in Thailand, but in the world, that you are going to run in the election with an absolute power of a person who might be trying to be prime minister after the election. How can it be free and fair?
I want to jump in here. It does seem like the three parties have a common ground and a common rival.
Yeah, and that will make this forum not very exciting.
So now I'm just wondering, what is the likelihood that the parties can work together at the election? Is there enough common ground? And there seems to be enough common ground for the three parties to work together.
Right.
Yes.
Please.
Kun Anutin always goes first for this question.
It's up to him.
Well, sometimes being ourselves and having our own belief might not satisfy our answer might not satisfy all concerned party, but to me, I haven't yet determined who is the rival after the next election. I mean, my first competition is to get myself and my party members to be in the parliament as many as I can. The election results will tell and will decide as to what direction each party will go forward. If there's any party, luckily it's not mine, but might be one of these two, could make a landslide, I don't think we have to fear of any rival. There is still a world criteria and standard that people have to accept. I don't feel that by just trying to adding all the numbers and whoever has attained majority without considering the party that people have decided to be their representatives, the party that has most representatives in the House. I still believe that we may say now, according to the Constitution or the Charter, that, well, whoever reaches the majority level, that guy will win. But I don't think so. There is still a rule that all the players understand that you can only come that far. So, and again, the upcoming election, the result of the election, regardless of anything happen beyond that, there may be given red card, yellow card, and actually under this charter, there's another orange card, which would disqualify you from the race prior to election. But we always respect the initial result. Even though somebody has been given red cards, record shows that they will come with even higher votes than the person that were disqualified. So I try to be very pragmatic and always be optimistic that all we need to have in this country is an election. We can guess people will take advantage, people will do whatever they can to benefit, their own parties. But there's only a certain level that they can go. And if we have good policy, we have good people, qualified contenders, we will always win. And the outcome of the election will determine this country's future. And we don't have to worry about any initial commitments or trying to, combine party A, B, C, D together and trying to make the factions. I think it is easy. Everyone must have its own polls that we can anticipate roughly what the outcome will be and use that as the model. But it can always alter when the real results pop out. So to me, with this special situation, I will say, come what may, I will say I play as it lies, and we move on from that. There's nothing worse than this anymore. And I'm used to a situation that if we pierce out from the worst, the only better thing can happen is just the magnitude of that betterness. So this is my belief.
Now there's some differences. The forum might be a little bit exciting, but I have different opinion from that of Kun Anutin, but I'm not going to quarrel with him. I am trying to persuade him to join me or join with some other parties, and then convince him that what we are going to do is really necessary for the country. There are roughly, that I can think of now, 4 things in 4 stages that political parties should do together. We don't need to, sign a contract or something like that. We can just sit here like this and say something, or even say things from the headquarters of the party. These 4 things in 4 stages are against the strategic master plan of the NCPO. The strategic master plan of the NCPO is just to write a constitution that is undemocratic, install the national strategy, reform plans that they determined, all the framework and the ideas in that. And then weaken political parties, prohibiting them from doing any activity so that they cannot even run when they are going to, they cannot even walk when they are going to run in a contest. Then the idea is, that strategy is that they will have 250 senators, and then they will form a government, and then run this country for another 10 or 20 years by using the national strategy and reform plans. So to do things against this strategic master plan of the NCPO, I propose that political parties can do 4 things. One is telling the NCPO to not only ease the prohibitions, but revoke, abolish every prohibition, so that political parties can do what they should do, as in most developed countries, especially to formulate policy. And then the second thing is political parties should join hands to demand for free and fair election, meaning less on zero interference from the NCPO in the election. The third thing is preventing the NCPO from forming a government. I'm not asking political parties here or anywhere to join hands in making a coalition in advance. But I think it's fair enough for political parties to tell the public that we are not going to support the military leader to become prime minister after election. The fourth thing, as to do something against the master plan, is at some stage in the future, after the government is formed, if the NCPO can form a government, for sure, the government will not be responsive to the demand of people. It will fail to solve the problems of the country, as most people wish. Then we need to amend the constitution. And so, and this kind of thing, we can say in advance, we can promise to the public in advance. Leave the leave aside the coalition to form a government for now. But these four things can be, can be agreed upon now, if not now, tomorrow, but the sooner the better.
I think we only need one, sir. That all of us stand together, that we all will do what is best for the country. We will do whatever is best for the country. We don't need to tell them.
But that will be very abstract.
Have you finished?
Long time ago.
I think there's a lot of common ground here, but there may be some fine details which allow some differences. I don't think any political party would disagree with the NCPO lifting all restrictions on activities. It makes no sense at the moment, actually, even just to say to wait for the organic law on elections, because a lot of the activities that parties would be engaging in has nothing to do with the election law. A lot of it will be to do with the political parties law. A lot of it is just doing our job, performing our duties of articulating policies and engaging with people about their problems and how to solve them. So I think that I'm sure we can all agree upon. And I don't believe that by lifting these restrictions, you would be inviting parties to cause trouble. Why would parties want to cause trouble when they know that if any trouble arises, that would only provide an excuse for elections to be postponed further? So, I don't see why lifting the restrictions would lead to any kind of instability or trouble or problems. Troublemakers would not really care about whether restrictions are lifted or not. They would be plotting to cause instability or violence, which would not be in any way any kind of formal political party activity. So I think number one, we can all agree upon. Number two, free and fair elections, I've already mentioned. But now there are a couple of problems that are beyond our control. The first, as is mentioned, is that the Prime Minister, the NCPO leader, has Article 44 at his disposal. And he has already used that power once to actually sack a member of the Election Commission. So that has already undermined the confidence that the Electoral Commission should have as an independent organization, because a precedent has been set whereby the NCPO leader can actually sack a member of an independent organization. Now, to overcome that, the best we can do now is to ask for a commitment from the NCPO leader that he must refrain from using his power in any way that would interfere with independent organizations or affect the integrity and credibility of free and fair elections. We can sign whatever agreement we like, but if we don't get a commitment from him, that is always going to undermine the confidence and credibility. The second thing, of course, is that it's no secret. You've got new political parties who have explicitly said that they would support the current Prime Minister to continue as Prime Minister after the elections. I think the NCPO leader has to come clean. Is he going to continue to be the referee, or is he going to be a player? If he is going to be a player, he should demonstrate his spirit that he would compete on equal terms. Again, that's beyond our control. It's up to him. If he chooses not to go down this path, we will still compete. We will be at a disadvantage. But that's not our concern. Our concern is if the elections are not credible in the eyes of the people, in the eyes of the international community, you are undermining the confidence that people should have in the country and in the future economy as well. So we can demand free and fair elections, but I think we need to be more specific about the pressure that we must put on the NCPO leader directly to ensure that these principles are not violated. The third point, for me, I was the first to propose that after the elections, the 250 senators must respect the wishes of the people. That means for me, anybody who can put together a majority in the lower house, elected lower house, should have the right to form a government. So the way I would phrase it this way, which is slightly different from the way Kun Chaturon is framing it, is because this is not about personalities. This is not about Kun Prayut. This is about the principle of democracy. And I think if we could try to avoid making it personal, but we make it about principles, we would be taking Thai politics forward rather than risk it going backwards to be the kind of confrontational politics centering around personalities. The result may not be different, but my point is the wishes of the people should be respected, and that those wishes can be reflected in the majority being put together in the elected lower house. Okay? As for the Constitution, again, I think we can all agree that there are many provisions in the Constitution that should be amended in the future. I'm glad that today Kun Chaturon says amend, because there have been talks about a complete rewrite or ripping up the current Constitution, not from his party, but from other parties. I think, again, that risks taking us back to the kind of confrontational politics. I think it makes sense to have at least an all-party consensus or committee of some form after the elections so that we can agree upon some of the fundamental principles in the Constitution that should be amended. So it's broad agreement, enough common ground. Doesn't say anything about whether we could be in a coalition together.
Something to think about. I just want to bring it forward, though. I mean, I think all of you brought up the fact that there are issues to do with growth, to do with inequality in terms of wealth distribution. For each party, what policies will you be pushing through? Kun Anutin, you can start and we'll go down.
Well, Rome is
some key policies.
The policy of every party has basic policy already, right? We want to make sure that when things come back to order, it has to be totally independent from when we had the military administration.
How will you address the issue of inequality in wealth distribution? How will your party address that issue?
I don't understand the question.
Right now, in terms of wealth, there's inequality. There are poorer parts of the country. There are richer parts of the country, like those in Bangkok. How will your party address the issue?
Well, like everyone said in these past few days, we said we already had 4.6% growth in GDP this year. But to me, that 4 something percent hasn't gone down to the base level. It stopped somewhere in the middle. So that creates inequality. This came from where? Whenever the country spends or invests in something, you can say that there's a growth and spending. So that makes GDP go up. But do we invest in the right stuff or not? Do we invest on things that we have to borrow money on the on the 25% and 25% and 75% borrowing or not? Do we prioritize the orders of investments? Do we need high-speed train right now? where many people in the Northeast still prefers riding their own pickup trucks rather than having high-speed train. Should we provide them with a better motorway, safer motorways? Do we need submarines right now? Do we need tomahawks? To me, no. So the money that should be spent to make sure that the inequality, or at least the distribution of the money, goes as deep as it can, is to make sure that we invest it on the things that we don't need to leverage ourselves, especially to foreign funds. We have so many projects that could be beneficial to Thai people as a whole, whereby all the multiplying effects, all the materials, all the cost of all the goods could be manufactured in the country. We said we depend heavily on foreign technologies. This is only an assumption, but in fact, many Thai corporates are able to do things without. If we were to require any technological assistance from foreign countries, why don't we act as a buyer? Why do we need them to come as an employer, as investors, or we have to borrow something to get that technologies? So it depends totally on how to prioritize the thing that we should spend, from going out from intensive care unit and then gradually move along. Why do we need EEC? Why are we so hurry about EEC right now, where the whole country is still suffering? People saying that the poverty has risen, but EEC only benefits a certain part of Thailand. But I'm not saying that we will never have the EEC. But do we have to do it right now? Why don't we just try to strengthen our base first, and then let's move on with some more complicated things, something like this.
Kun Chaturon?
Yes. Usually in the past, my party, or the predecessor of this present party, because we've been dissolved so many times. In the election, we will have a policy platform that can be very specific and can tell a lot of details in the form of either projects or program or a package of policy. But to tell you the truth, now I can tell you that kind of things yet, because we are not allowed to formulate the policy. When we formulate the policy, we need to talk with stakeholders. We need to talk with a lot of people. And especially now, if you think of the electorates, the new voters who have never voted before, there are roughly 7 million people. We haven't had the chance to sit and talk with them. So we need to talk with people. But we have tried to formulate the core ideas of the policy, but that needs to be tested in the near future, hopefully, if we are allowed to. The policies I believe that the policy of the party will emphasize two parts. One part is whether or not we want to stand for democracy and how we are going to strive for democracy, and that's about constitution amendment and so on. But that will of course, will be stressed, but it doesn't take much time to elaborate. What we will focus when we emphasize is just one thing, the economy. So economic policies will be the most important for my party. And I believe that it's the policy or is the area that most people would be interested in. We still, we want to see growth with a faster rate, growth with stability, but more relevant than that is
faster
growth
rate
with,
would be what, 5, 6%? What are you looking at faster rate?
Thai economy used to go with 7% or something like that, but it's not possible to reach 7% in just 1 or 2 years, but we try. But the idea is growth is necessary. Faster growth is important. And then distribution. But by distribution, I don't mean that we're going to use taxation to shift wealth from one part of the society and give it to the other part of the society. But we should provide people, or people at the grassroots, middle level, the opportunity, the access to fund, access to loan, and opportunity to start or to do their business. We believe
I just want to jump in here before I get Kun Abhisit's perspective. How active is Kun Thaksin in all these policies of the Phue Thai Party? Is he still involved? Is he still active?
I believe that Kun Thaksin is still very active in thinking about this country or the policies. But according to the new and the present constitution and the relevant laws, he, as a person who is not a member of the party, has nothing to do with the party, cannot influence the party. And if we at the party allow him to either dominate or influence the party will be dissolved. And all of the executive members will be banned from politics probably about 10 years. So we must make sure that Kun Thaksin, even though he is still very active, is concerned about this country, will not have any influence by any means to the party.
We have just under 4 minutes. Abhisit, 2 minutes before we wrap it up.
Over the last 4 years, I don't think I've done anything illegal. But I've continued to actively engage with everybody so that I've learned about the problems of people, from farmers to workers to trade associations to first-time voters and so on. We've come to the conclusion that economic management needs a paradigm shift. Number one, trickle-down economics does not work anymore. And it shouldn't surprise you. Growth, even engineered by the government, and this government has spent about 1 trillion baht in economic stimulus. And yet that has not been able to revive the rural economy. And it's not difficult to see why. Because for all the money that has been spent or trickles down to the rural communities, you can hear a giant sucking sound of money coming back to the telecommunications companies, 3, 4 of them at most, because as soon as people have income, a lot of their expense now go into telecommunications. You can hear the giant sucking sound from the modern retail chains that again take income from local people and do not return it to the local community. So trickle-down economics does not work. The old tax and spend redistribution does not work. the only way we can bring benefits to everybody is to make this paradigm shift where our policy is formulated with distribution in mind at the beginning, not as an afterthought. High growth is better, sure. 6% is better than 4%, 8% is better than 6%. But we have to have a pro-poor growth being engineered. There's a difference between, for instance, deciding to stimulate growth, like, for instance, this government and the previous government has done, by allowing, for instance, import of wheat to help the animal feeds industry, but actually hurts millions of households, for instance. So the party is now clear. We want to shift the paradigm of economic management. GDP is now a poor indicator of the livelihoods of most people. We are developing indicators that will enrich the reflection of the quality of lives of people. Secondly, we need to tackle all the monopolistic elements in the economy, both in the public and private sector. Some public state enterprises are actually abusing their monopolistic powers to the detriment of ordinary consumers and people. A lot of private companies continue to have market dominance and exercise those market powers in a way that is unfair to the SMEs, to the small entrepreneurs in rural areas, or even the new startups here. So our policies will be directly geared towards helping those people to generate the growth. And to do that, we need to decentralize, we need to deregulate and decentralize to allow many more people to be able to actively engage in the economy. That's roughly the economic policy. Time is up.
Yes.
But I would just add a further comment. Yes, there is this challenge about democracy. We've got a few barriers we've all identified today that we need to jump over. But it's not just about that. We also have to learn the lessons from the past. Even if we achieve the how many point plan that we have in place finally, an elected government that reflects the will of the people, the bigger challenge is keeping democracy. And that can only be done through good governance, through stamping out corruption, and that's also a key platform of the Democrat Party.
Before we wrap it up, just one question for the floor. You can just raise your hand. How many of you here think that post-election there'll be greater stability and growth in the country? After elections are held, do you see greater stability and growth in Thailand? Anyone? 5 more seconds to raise your hands. Just a show of hands to see optimism or pessimism. And by the looks of it, there are very few hands out there. Just go down the line. Kun Anutin, post-elections, greater stability, greater growth, yes or no? Okay. Kun Chaturon?
Well, the country will be better than.
No, yes or no, Kun Chaturon? We're out of time.
Oh, what is that? Yes or no?
Whether there'll be greater stability and greater growth post-election. Kun Abhisit.
If you elect me as the majority, yes, a definite yes, it will be better.
On that note, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for a very, very interesting session. And now our conference has come to an end during the 2 days of comprehensive panel discussion from our honorable guest speakers. I believe that all distinguished participants will benefit from Thailand Focus 2018. On behalf of the Stock Exchange of Thailand, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all of you who participate in the event this year, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to welcome you all at Thailand Focus 2019 next year. See you all next year. Thank you. สวัสดีค่ะ